I'm Marc Jerram, BSc Hons, Grad Dip ELR, AWCF, CJF from Staffordshire in the United Kingdom.
You know, the very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier Podcast.
I had a soccer coach, and he always said, we are going to be the fittest team always out there. Because in the moment, you don't want to be worried about being tired. You want to be focused on the soccer game.
Right.
Which is what's going to translate for me, hopefully, in the CJF, is that I'm not worried about being tired. I can focus on the task at hand.
And granted, he was like, get your specimens made. 3 months before you take your exam, get all your AW specimens made. It's good to have other people putting that pressure on you as well. Sometimes if it's a single journey, and you've not got mentors that are coaching you, helping you, you kind of rest a little bit.
If you're hearing this, you are currently on the non-subscriber feed. If you would like to hear this episode in its entirety, please subscribe using the link below. If you're a student, apprentice, or just find yourself in a situation where it isn't financially feasible to subscribe, please reach out to me on Facebook or through the website. The good folks at Out West Design and Fabrication are lending their support by helping us to cover your scholarship subscription. You can check out many of their incredible projects on their Facebook page. Out West Design and Fabrication, your choice for farrier rigs. Now here's a sample of this week's episode. Thank you for listening.
Most people that I know in this industry only want the best for the other people in the industry, which is a pretty cool thing.
Welcome, everyone. Today's guest may be a familiar voice to some. I interviewed Marc several years ago at my very first focus as part of a panel discussion. That interview was just a quickie and divided between two great guests, so I'm glad to have been able to get Marc on here again for a longer chat. As you will hear, Marc has been a busy fella since qualifying, pursuing a lot of higher level exams and his passion for research. He even shares some info on gait analysis technologies that I wasn't even aware of. Highly intelligent and keenly passionate about this trade, I really learned a lot with this one. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did.
There you go. You almost ran out of the letters of the alphabet to list there. So you're somebody who's clearly passionate about pursuing higher education.
Absolutely. Ever since I graduated, or even before then, I've been very passionate about expanding my knowledge and looking at new techniques and just doing the best I can really for the horses.
Right. So how did you get your start as a horseshoer in the first place?
Okay, I started in the year 2002. I started my apprenticeship with a local farrier to me called Ian Smith. I was his one and only apprentice, and as soon as I finished school at the age of 16, the very day I finished my exams, the next day I was out shoeing, and I've been doing that now for 24 years. I haven't got myself a proper job yet.
Right. And when did you start this journey into the higher level stuff?
It's an interesting one, really. I graduated in 2006 after passing the diploma exam, and then ambitions to go and work abroad.
Okay.
So I got in contact with some guys in New Zealand, saved up for a fair few months, worked part-time for myself and part-time for some of the local farriers doing day work. And I went over to New Zealand in September 2007 and travelled all around the country doing competitions and working with some very good farriers over there. And they had a real thirst for knowledge, and all they cared about was expanding their knowledge. And at the time, they didn't have really many options over there. But of course, now the world is a lot more open in terms of things being able to get sent over there. Yeah, I mean, some of the competitions back when I was competing over there, we were doing things like corking and wedge on feet, concave corking and wedge, which you don't really get so much in this country, but they're still used on horses there, the hunters. So when I came back, I think it was March 2008, they just started up a degree programme at Myerscough College in conjunction with the University of Central Lancashire. And that was run by Mark Caldwell and John Riley. And basically that created a bit of a pathway and progression over time of how to learn new techniques, gradually drip feeding new information into yourself. And I thought it would suit me as I was starting the business up to increase my knowledge as I went along with that, really. So at the time, it was a 5-year program, which sounds like a long time. It was 3 years of foundation degree and then 2 more years to get a BSc top up. And I just fell in love with doing the new information and the new techniques. And again, as you've probably heard plenty of times in your podcast, when people are training for your associate, it takes a handbrake off when you're shoeing. And that's exactly my experience with the degree course. It opened my eyes to new techniques and evidence-based ideas, really. And also, it's a very practical sort of course as well. You had to be high level of shoemaking as well. At the time, it was bound in with the AWCF exam. So when you finished your degree course, you could take the associate exam at college at the same time. So you came out with 2 awards, effectively. Right. Yeah, came out with the BSc honours with the first, which was very pleased to get, and the associate as well. So then I had a couple of years then just working, shoeing, writing articles. I'm a big passionate writer of articles. I've had them published all around the world. Very lucky with that. And then recently, I'd say probably about 5 years ago, the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons down in London opened up a course for farriers to go to do further research as well. Okay. The BSc exam was focused on writing a dissertation, and so was the RVC course as well. And so by going to the RVC, I managed to sort of keep up my skills a little bit in terms of research, but because I do like to write a lot of articles, it helped to keep my skills sharp as well. And yeah, I just found it really enjoyable, really. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And what, in doing this evidence-based research, what are some of the projects that you've taken on, and what have you learned from them?
Okay, well, again, there's a natural progression in that, really, because technology evolves over time. When I did my BSc, it was just over 10 years ago now, and my dissertation was looking at static and dynamic asymmetry in 10 unbroken horses. So the idea was to remove as many variables as possible. So when you got horses in work, you got different standards of rider, different fitness levels. I just wanted to take all those variables out. Luckily, my dad was a bit of a horse dealer, so we had loads of horses we could access to, and pretty much do what we wanted to, really. Obviously, ethically, but it would be fine. And at the time, we were using on-track gait analysis system, and I used to use Quintic as well. And that was video-based gait analysis. And at the time, that was about as good as you're going to get the time. But of course, now, as time progresses, and we've got hoofbeat, and we've got slope, and we've got various other sensor-based analysis, and actually can actually calculate more strides. When you look back at the dissertation did 10 years ago, even actually that's quite outdated now. So, but it's just what we could do at the time. Right. And then when I did the RVC course, I used, I think it's about 20 cadaver limbs. And I wanted to monitor the effects of limb loading on the internal structures within the hoof and also the hoof capsule itself. So took 10 cadaver limbs, transected at the ulna. A lot of studies are transected at the carpus. However, you tend to lose the extensor and flexor muscles, and it's not true representation of limb loading. So the more the limb you've got, the more the chance you've got replicating the actual limb loading of a live horse. Right. So yeah, I took some screws and placed them in various location points on the cornea band and on the distal aspect of the hoof wall, and loaded the limb up to a mid-stance force if the horse was just standing, and the mid-stance force of horses in the walk gait, and the mid-stance force of horses in the trot gait, and they were radiographed every time, based upon a force plate as well, so we could get an accurate reading of those exact stance forces. Okay. And then we were radiographed, and the dissipation of the hoof and the angular of the palmar angle and the angle of the navicular bone also changed upon limb loading. It probably sounds like common sense, really, but it hasn't really been verified, so to speak. So, yeah, they're the 2 dissertations I took part of. Okay. And in that second one, were there any surprises for you? Not really. No, I think we get to realise we can see when the horse moves that the hoof wall would expand. And also we can see the cornea band circumference would increase, the palmar angle would decrease, and so would the angle of the navicular bone, the tendinous surface of that. Right. And how did you brace the limb to stand up with, without a trunk attached to it? A loading press, a modified loading press that the RVC had constructed for other studies. Oh, okay. So it's ready-made, basically. All it needed to do was provide the limbs. So it's during COVID as well, which was also a very tricky time to actually get in there to get data, because they didn't really want you there, to be honest, but I managed to talk my way in there. So yeah, I took 10 limbs down to the RVC, 20 limbs it was, that's it. And yeah, transected at the ulna with a bolt that came from the loading press that went into a hole in the ulna. You drilled a 10mm hole into. Okay. So it locked in the limb on top of the force plate. All barefoot horses, all trimmed to a certain protocol as well. So it, again, removes that variable a little bit as well. Right. Yeah, because that is the one difficult thing with anything hoof-related is how many variables can you remove? Exactly that, to make a true representation. And no science is ever perfect. But if you can just remove as many variables as possible,
Right.
and make it very repeatable as well. So you create a recipe of a scenario so that anybody can go and replicate that recipe. Same as they could do for baking a cake. You can do for replicating limb loading. So again, all these measures were used by using Metron as well. So another verified product on there. So you can really see the true accurate representation. So all the radiographs I've got, they can be sent to anybody and they can replicate my measures and it's repeatable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, as you went through this process, what were some of the things that changed in your day-to-day shoeing as you learned these things? Like, as you said, the handbrake came off.
Yeah.
What do you think changed in your practice?
I think it's respecting the upper limb, really. I think it's seeing what happens above the knee. And even now, I was looking at a horse yesterday with rotated pelvis, and you're shooting to complement a rotated pelvis as well. And looking at the posture of a horse and the behaviour as well quite a bit. You have to see horses move. You have to see them being ridden, because even when you see them moving in hand compared to ridden,
Right.
you get a different set of circumstances, and that can influence what you apply to the hoof as well. And that's only going to progress more now. I use hoof beat and slave as well. It creates a repeatable measure. You can see it against time as well, really. I always say to my clients, judging by the results, not by any bullshit that comes out of my mouth, basically, because in the horse world, there's plenty of people like to talk the talk, but can't walk it, and the horse won't ever lie. If you think however good you think you are, if the horse is going like crap, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about, getting the definable results for the horse owner.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go into that rotated pelvis. How would you shoe it to complement that?
Yeah, it's something that I adapted myself over time. So far, it's worked every time. There's always been one that doesn't. So if you stand from behind the horse and you get the horse stand square, which is incredibly difficult, that's the first obstacle. When you get them standing 4 limbs square and they're not resting one back leg, or they're not starting to move off, get yourself an image on your phone of the horse stood behind you. You'll see the tubercocci will be a different height, left versus right. You'll see an asymmetry of muscle build-up as well, either side. And it's a very simple application. What I do, I put a graduated frog support on the low side and a flat frog support on the other side. So basically, you're evening up the tubercocci heights, allowing the limb to move symmetrically, and it develops over time as well. And the ones I've done that too, which transformed them, and it's such a simple application. Any farrier could do, basically, but it's just making sure you assess what's in front of you. And some of these ones that are sunken down on one side may need a little bit of lateral support as well, because of the rotation of the limb a little bit. But yeah, but by lifting up the one side and leveling that off, it seems to sort out the vast majority, really.
So the side that's lower will have the less muscle development?
Yeah, you get atrophy of the muscle where it's overdeveloped on the other side, where it's a high side.
Okay.
And sometimes they can go to vet practice and they get a steroid injection into the sacroiliac joint to help complement that, and the physio work complements that as well. It's a team effort, but that's been my approach. It seems to have worked.
Right. And on those horses, for the side that's taking the brunt of it, the one that's overdeveloped, is that typically the limb that also travels a little closer underneath because it's trying to support more of the horse? Yeah,
the swing phase of a stride is asymmetrical as well. So they've got different flight patterns as well, really. But I know I keep coming back to the gait analysis systems, but by using the AI analysis I've got called SLADE, basically uses video footage, markerless, and it shows whether there's any asymmetry of movement on the pelvis. And I'm doing a webinar on that in a few weeks, actually, and I've got an example of a horse which was very rotated through the pelvis, and by using that same technique, the next time I went to shoe the horse, repeated the assessment, he went from a moderate asymmetry to no asymmetry present at all. Yeah, that's about a good result you can hope for, really. Yeah.
And then once you've reached that point, do you take the wedge off the other side?
I'd like to then transfer into a flat.
Okay.
Yeah, into a flat. And then if the horse needs, sometimes they may need frog support behind anyway because of their lower limb conformation if they're standing under. However, some of them can just return just being back into normal, because I always find with frog support, you're building up the digital cushion. You're creating the strength and mass in there for the hoof to look after itself after a while. And I think even when you take the frog support down, a lot of horses, that strength stays there for a good while afterwards.
Okay.
So it may be a case of sometimes you stick it in for a while and then you take it out for a short break and then pop it back in. It's never a weakness to keep changing tactics with horses. One of the weaknesses is sometimes if we just stick to what we're doing and blindly, and it takes us down a progressive negative path.
Okay, and what type of horses do you normally deal with in your practice?
A real variety, really. I see anything and everything. The only sport we don't have in my area is polo. I do dressage, show jumpers, race horses, happy hackers, endurance, show horses, everything really. But the vast majority of my own personal work now is lameness and veterinary referrals, really, is what I see. I work with a few practices, and if it's got to a point where the original farrier, reach where they can get to, then we all work together. We get the horse back on the track, and then I can send the horse back to the farrier with some suggestions after a while. And so again, by showing the change over time, by using radiographs, by using Metron, and also the gait changes as well, it gives a bit of support to the farriers to carry on doing what we're doing, because it shows what's working. A lot of the ones I see are laminitic referrals as well. Yeah,
Is that kind of a predominant problem in your area?
Yeah, I think it's a predominant problem throughout the whole UK, really. People are riding less on the roads now because the roads are too dangerous, they're too busy, they're too fast. They're not getting as much work, and the metabolism's changing. The hay is getting better quality, the feeds are getting better quality, and underlying conditions such as Cushing's are developing in the older horses because the horses are living longer. And so it's a progressive issue, really, that I think is only going to stay and get worse, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, bleak outlook on the future. What would be the next in line as far as therapeutic issues that you are dealing with?
If you would like to hear this episode in its entirety, please subscribe using the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening.